Macca's Guides.
Hey guys, Macca here, playing The Outer Worlds, and in this video I'm going to show you all 5 of the science weapons. I'll show you exactly how to unlock them, I'll show you their stats, I'll talk a little bit about them, and I'll even leave you with a little bit of gameplay of each so you can see them in action if you don't end up going for all of them yourself. The first one you can grab most easily is on the planet called Groundbreaker. Once you enter, go through the customs, past the security gate, and into the kind of room with all of the beds. You'll drop down after jumping onto some of the beds and crawling through a hole. There'll be a bunch of enemies in this area. You'll take them out, and one of them will have a key, and he will be the squad leader. So make sure you pick up that key. You can get everything else if you want it, though. And then use the key on the door in here, and as soon as this opens up, you'll find the science weapon inside of this green kit on the desk. And this one is the Prismatic Hammer. Now basically there are 5 science weapons, and each one of them is a different kind of weapon. So the hammer is 2-handed melee. We also have like a 1-handed melee, a pistol, and a rifle and stuff like that. So this is the Prismatic Hammer, which deals with plasma damage. It's a 2-handed melee weapon and does a decent amount of damage on each swing. Now this weapon also has the ability to knock back enemies, which can be quite useful, and because it does deal plasma damage, it can turn your enemies into a pile of ash. There is actually an achievement or trophy for turning 100 enemies into a pile of ash, but it does seem kind of random when they do and when they don't. It can be pretty useful on the lower difficulties, but generally this isn't a great weapon, as I don't think melee is a great strategy for this game necessarily. It can be fun, it's kind of cool. That's the first one you're going to unlock. They only get cooler from here.
You gotta suffer! That's the last of them! Down they go!
Next up, we have the Shrink Ray. You can probably tell what it does by its name, and this one is found on the kind of small planet nearby of the Groundbreaker and Terra 2. It's called Phineas's Laboratory. You can fly here after visiting Groundbreaker for the first time. You can follow the quest line for Weapons of the Void, I believe it's called, which is the quest line that kind of brings you to a bunch of the science weapons. And once you land here, walk inside, you can talk to Phineas a bit and then just pick up his Shrink Ray nearby. There is a Borstwurst pig nearby that you can kind of test this on. But this science weapon is very interesting. It can be fun and has some cool moments with it. However, with that being said, it doesn't really do a lot of damage, and the shrinking effect doesn't last very long. You basically have to be aiming at the enemy as they are shrinking, or else it kind of stops the effect. And it doesn't really do much damage either, so I kind of found that you don't even really get a kill before it has to reload, and it kind of takes forever in order to kill an enemy, unless you're super OP in the area you are in. It's fun to use, good for the lulz, but not very effective.
Here I go!
Next up, we have the Mandibular Rearranger available on the planet Scylla. You can grab the location of this one if you buy data pads from Gladys, but don't waste your bits. I'll just show you exactly where to go. Once you land, you'll notice the giant kind of mining thing in front of you. If you kind of go down the hill and to your left, you'll spot a town off in the distance. You can follow the road to this town, and then once you reach it, there might be some enemies, which I've already taken out. Go to the top of the hill, and as it evens out, there is a small little house on the right-hand side. Go inside and find this in a small little green toolbox. And this one's kind of cool. It's a one-handed melee weapon, and it has the special ability of like staggering enemies. If you get a couple of really good hits on an enemy, it can basically freeze them in place for a solid amount of seconds. I think the effect of the weapon is dependent entirely on your science skill in your kind of character's build. So if you do want to use this weapon and use it effectively, you might want to upgrade that a little bit. But it can be pretty useful against big enemies. If you can get a couple of hits on them and stun lock them, you can kind of unload on them with your regular weapon, build up your companion special attacks, and then unload. But on the higher difficulties, melee is usually not a very good strategy.
Let's show him. Down they go.
Next up, we are on the planet of Monarch. We are at the UDL lab. You can buy the data on where this lab is from one of the vendors, or you can just go exactly to where I am on the map and do it on your own. A ton of enemies here that I've already taken out, and you're going to want to use the ladder on the outside to kind of get upstairs. I think you can go inside and just take a staircase, but we're going to do it this way. And upstairs, you can find a keypad or an access card, and you'll definitely need that unless you have 55 hacking skill, which I doubt you do because it would require you to basically have invested all of your perk points into hacking unless you're doing this later on in the game. Nonetheless, once you have the key card, head into the actual lab underneath, and you'll notice that the Gloop Gun is locked, but you can now use the terminal. And what we want to do is answer the questions if we don't want to hack, which, again, unless you have a really high hacking skill, just ignore it and we'll answer the questions. There are a total of 3 answers for every question. For the first question, we're going to choose the third option. It'll say correct, and then you can press continue. For the second question, we'll want to choose the first option as shown on screen, and then that'll be correct. And then there is a third question, which we'll also need to get correct, and the answer for the third question is the second one. After completing all 3 of the questions, you can leave the terminal, and the Gloop Gun should now be yours. This is a pretty cool launcher weapon that basically launches enemies into like 0 gravity, and it is energy, and it has a capacity of like 30 ammo, but every shot uses 10 ammo. So you basically get 3 shots for every reload. But it can be effective with really big groups of enemies. If they're all kind of running at you and there's a lot of melee enemies, you might want to kind of shoot near them, kind of put them all up into the air, and then kind of ignore them as they fall, or shoot them out of the sky. You'll see the gameplay on screen. You can get pretty creative with how you use it. It doesn't do a heck of a lot of damage, but it is a very cool gun to use, so it's up to you how you use it. And I'll leave you here with a little bit of gameplay of it.
Get on.
Last but not least, we have the Mind Control Ray on Monarch, which is a little bit more complicated as there are a lot of quest steps, but isn't too bad at all. First off, on the Groundbreaker planet, talk to Lilia Hagen in the Sublight offices, and she will send you on a new quest line. This will bring you to Monarch to find a contractor who has a passcode on their corpse. Take that passcode and then go to the town of Fallbrook and meet up with Catherine. Follow her questline until you learn the password for the computer in the abandoned labs. Now, once you're in the abandoned labs, you can hack the computer and go inside. Additionally, while you're in Fallbrook, you can talk to Duncan and buy his datapad to get more info on where you can find the science weapon as well, but that part is completely optional. Once you find the abandoned labs on the map and have the password unlocked, hack the terminal to open up the elevator, go inside, and ride it to the top, which will trigger a loading screen but bring you to a new area. That might sound really confusing, but basically just follow the Space Crime Continuum questline until you're forced to go to the abandoned lab with your newly acquired password. Once you've taken the elevator all the way to the top, you will basically just navigate to the back area. You'll see a little kind of door with a gap, and you have to kind of sprint and jump across the gap. Take a couple of ladders and whatnot in order to basically gain access to a vent, and behind that vent kind of is where you'll find the mind control ray, which is, in my opinion, probably the most useful in terms of actual combat for all of the science weapons. It basically controls the mind of the person you're aimed at with a jingle. It has a pretty cool backstory if you actually read the backstory on its stats page. And it basically tries to like turn the enemies against each other, controls them. It kind of just makes them sit there and take damage. And it actually does a decent amount of damage over time. I think this weapon's actually particularly useful if you find yourself in a 1v1 situation against a larger enemy, as you can basically kind of stun lock that enemy and just DPS them over time. And I'll leave you guys with a little bit of gameplay of this weapon in action. Thank you so much for watching. I hope the video was fun, informational, exciting to watch, all that stuff. If it was, drop a like, consider sharing it with a friend, consider subscribing to the channel. Special thanks to Loveboat Gopher for a couple of the tips provided in this video. A shout out to everyone on Patreon for supporting the show. Shout out to Double O, and hopefully I see you guys next time. Peace.